freaking first cut. Golly.
What's going on, YouTube? This is your DFS preview for the Wells Fargo Championship. We're going to go tier by tier to let you know the best plays. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll jump into it right now. Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and we are going through the board DFS style for this week's Wells Fargo Championship. Plenty to discuss, and joining me to do just that, Nejad is here. Sia, welcome in.
Like the tournament, like the venue, I think this is going to be, and you know, the player pool, there's some hidden talent in here. I'm really excited about this tournament. And for the record, this is pretty much near where I grew up. I didn't grow up in Potomac, Maryland, but in a city and town pretty much adjacent to it. So I don't know, maybe that'll help my DFS game this week. Who knows?
I hope it does. The hometown narrative. We're already off and running. Greg DuCharme is here. Greg, this is a fun one. You and I were saying just before we went hot, we have just enough information on this course to be dangerous.
Yeah, you feel like you know what. Last week there was a little discrepancy for me, right? I know you love distance. It panned out that way. I was a little between distance and more of like the solid ball striker. This week I feel like we know what it takes, because we do have just enough history. Some of the guys have played here already. We have a really good idea. And I think it's a fun replacement course because we do know a little bit about it. And then you look at the board, and man, if you're a Team No Putt fan, I think this might be the week for you.
I certainly am a Team No Putt fan. Yes, I do fall into that category. Okay, let's set the stage here, gentlemen. I'll share my screen. This is from my website, RickRunGood.com, and we are not going to Quail Hollow for the Wells Fargo Championship because that will be reserved for the President's Cup later this year. So, Sia, we are going to TPC Potomac, and as I mentioned, we know just enough. There have been two events. The Quicken Loans National in 2018, Quicken Loans National in 2017, where we saw TPC Potomac in all its glory. How would you begin to assess this golf course?
Well, I think the conventional wisdom here is going to bear out, which is please be accurate off the tee. And, you know, you're going to have some long irons coming in. You have some small greens. So we're really looking for accurate hitters, guys who are obviously good with the approach game, but that doesn't really change week to week. We're always kind of looking for that. We talked before we went on about putting and whether or not we're going to be on, you know, sort of Team No Putt or not. I think the three of us, generally speaking, tend to be on that Team No Putt side. And when I see that a previous winner here was Kyle Stanley, the guy we kind of jokingly sort of bring up as a play here and there, or maybe it's just me that does that. I think that lends, and that's just one guy, so I'm not going to create a narrative behind just a Kyle Stanley win, but it does lend itself to the idea that if you can just stay with accurate ball strikers and guys who maybe aren't that great at putting, but are really good everywhere else, for example, like bogey avoidance, you know, greens in regulation, things of that nature off the tee, then that might be the player to pick this week.
Yeah, Kyle Stanley won the Quicken Loans National in 2017. Francesco Molinari won it in 2018. Greg, I only have 2 years worth of data, obviously, but in my model that I run, it bears out that driving accuracy is more important here than any other course on the PGA Tour schedule this year. And when you start to go back and read some of the quotes, the last time we were at TPC Potomac, and you start to look at the media data, you know, what they give us access to, and you look at 3.5 inch, you know, Kentucky bluegrass in the rough, like I think it's going to be fairly penal if you're not playing out of the fairway.
It also sounds like it might be thick. Might be wet, might be a little soggy on the weekend, a little cold. And when you have that 3.5 inch rough, it may grow significantly through the week and get pretty long. And then just out of the rough, you have some, you know, woods to deal with, some thick trees. It's not really a recovery kind of course. So you have to keep the ball in play. The advantage is, and the thing I find very interesting about driving accuracy percentage here is I think you can club down a lot. I think there's a lot of less than driver opportunities. So I'm not necessarily looking at just the driving accuracy percentage of players, but I do want to know that when guys have, when they're hitting a long iron into the green. Greens are regulation. You look at a stat like that. Greens are regulation, strokes gained approach, strokes gained off the tee. You kind of combine those kind of things and you get an idea of what kind of control a player has over their golf ball. And I think there's a lot of guys like that in this field, and some of them are very fairly priced.
Yes, because if you look at, when you start looking at like accuracy, they tend to be the shorter hitters. The shorter hitters tend to only have like 5 spots on tour where things go well for them. So they generally are pretty cheap. They generally have longer odds. So I think there's plenty of value to be had. We're just going to have to figure out where they piece together in the rest of the board and how we can best allocate that value.
That's the thing. Like, if you remember last week, I wasn't on Team Rahm, unfortunately for me, because I just hated how my lineup construction looked with Rahm in the lineup, because I really didn't like the 6K range, for example. And, some of the ranges I just wasn't fond of. Here, I mean, if you want to play like a guy like Rory or a couple guys up top, I think, like Greg said, there are so many guys that are fairly priced at whether it's the 7K range or 8K, 9K. You can kind of make whatever lineup you like because some of those guys are in play. So I think my advice here would be make the lineup you want, but just like last week, beware, maybe more than ever, or at least be as much aware as you were last week of ownership, because I think there are going to be some guys that people gravitate to. And that doesn't mean don't play those guys, but be very cognizant of some of those high owned players that are in there and have some lineups that pivot off of those guys onto some of these lesser guys that might play just as well, because this is golf, but are going to be maybe 1/4 the ownership.
It is a par 70, Greg, which should help keep the winning scores in check. I guess that doesn't really matter in terms of fantasy scoring, because whoever scores the most points, like that's how it's going to work. It doesn't matter if the winning score is 1 under or 21 under. But Kyle Stanley won this, I believe it's 7 under par. And then Frankie Molinari won it at 21 under, but he was 8 shots better than everybody else. So like, if I make you guess the winning score here on a Monday afternoon, where do you think you end up?
Oh, I mean, even if you look at they've had like some senior events here, and it seems to be high single digits. I think we get into the low double digits this week. It sounds like it's going to be soft. I think it'll still play difficult, but with the softer conditions, I wouldn't be surprised to see a 13 under win, something in that range, 12, somewhere between, probably 12 and 14 under would be my guess. And look, that means you don't have to fill it up on the greens. You avoid mistakes. You hit some good shots and give yourself a lot of looks, and you can tally it up that far. You start making mistakes, it could be really difficult to. I don't think there's going to be a huge birdie bogey spread from the guys near the top. I think you got to play a rather conservative strategy this week.
All right, well, we will dive into that strategy. We'll start with the 10K golfers, but we are first going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
I need you to produce a Godfather.
We need hits.
Can one thing go right with this picture?
Cut it!
And we are back. Now, before we jump into this player pool, reminder that the fan one and done, the voting, the form is in the link. You can go vote right now. Go get it in, because come Tuesday morning when we go live for the mega preview pod, we will be locking those votes in. So make sure you get your golfer for this week, and maybe some of those potential options, Sia, are Rory McIlroy, $11,500. Tony Finau, $10,600. Abraham Answer, $10,400. Corey Connors is $10,100. And Matt Fitzpatrick rounds out the 5 golfers above $10,000. How should we best allocate our funds this week?
Yeah, obviously a lot of good options here. This might come down again to ownership, although I think a lot of these guys are going to carry some ownership percentage for really good reasons, frankly. The 2 I like the best are probably Rory McIlroy and Corey Connors. Again, those are 2 that are probably going to be pretty popular, especially Corey Connors. I just think Corey Connors in particular is just such a good course fit. He's going to keep it in the fairway. Some of the times when he has struggles with the short game, it shouldn't really crush him here. So for me, it's Connors, and I see we're bringing up Rory McIlroy here. There's not a ton of argument to be had against Rory McIlroy, and especially when you consider the fair pricing here, it certainly makes sense to have Rory as a part of your squad.
Yeah, Rory is technically our defending champion. Obviously, that was at Quail Hollow, so I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that. The good news is, though, Greg, that Rory McIlroy, very good golfer at lots of courses all around the world. And here I'm showing Corey Connors. He's just phenomenal off the tee. He's excellent on approach. I agree with Sia. He will be very popular this week. Is that good chalk or bad chalk?
Oh, I think it's good chalk. I'm not sure Corey Connors is going to win this week, which maybe allows some opportunity to pivot based on his price. But I think he's an extremely safe guy in your lineup. He's an extremely safe option. I don't see this going poorly for him by any stretch of the imagination. It's a great course fit. There's no reason not to play him other than lineup construction. Maybe ownership steers you away. And I do think there are options to pivot. I think Matt Fitzpatrick is a great option. This golf course seems perfect for a Matt Fitzpatrick. So I love that play. I love the Tony Finau play. I think Tony Finau last week really got something going on the greens on the weekend. That could be a really positive sign. And at the same time, he's been hitting the ball great for a long time. And when you watch a guy, I mean, he had 2 rounds last week where he led the field in strokes gained approach the green. He was flagging it. I look at his driving distance, and Tony Finau's driving distance is down a little bit this year. I don't know if that's because he's clubbing up off the tee. Like, he hasn't been on TV that often. I don't know if he's clubbing down off the tee, if his speed's it doesn't seem like his speed's going down. So I think he may be adopting a little more of a conservative style. That could really benefit him here. So I love Finau and Fitzpatrick as pivot plays to Rory and Connors, but really all 4 of them are great options. And this is one of those situations where I think you could build the rest of your lineup and come back to this range later and choose the guy that fits best price-wise. Because they really, I'm not crazy about Abraham Answer, even though he has a great start here in the past. I don't think he's hitting it that great right now. So he might be the one guy that gets left out for me. But any of these guys can play, and this comes down to construction at the end. So it might be my last stop.
That's an interesting way to do it. I am actually quite smitten with Matt Fitzpatrick. He lost 3.2 strokes putting the last time we saw him. His missed cut at the RBC Heritage, second worst putting week ever in his entire career. I doubt that happens again, and he's been basically phenomenal otherwise. Okay, Sia. Well, Greg doesn't mind filling this place out last as long as he doesn't get stuck with Abe Answer. Is there a case to be made for Abe? Is this kind of a momentum building week for Tony Finau? How about some of these guys in the middle of the 10K range?
It's going to be so interesting to see how many people jump on Tony Finau, because I mean, he really was, other than, a couple bad days of putting, he was absolutely, vintage. I don't even want to say vintage. The Tony Finau that, like, over the last few years that we've all kind of talked about, like, that's kind of who he was last weekend at the Mexico Open, especially on Sunday. So I sort of get the Tony Finau argument, but I don't think I'm going to get to Tony Finau ultimately. I think he's a fine play. I just know that unless his ownership happens to be low, which I don't think is going to be the case, I don't think I'm going to jump aboard. I still think there's some potential volatility in his game, but I definitely think he's a good course fit. I'd probably prefer Rory and Corey Connors, like I said at the outset. But if I had a third place, it would probably be Tony Finau over Abraham Answer and Matt Fitzpatrick.
Okay, well, I think we've got this whole thing covered. I like Fitzpatrick probably more than most of these guys. Rory, is Rory just going to do the Rahm thing, Greg, and just go out and just like run this? I know it's not Quail Hollow, but he drives the ball great, although maybe he doesn't get to use driver as often. He's still putting up good results, and he's losing strokes putting. Do we just find a week where Rory gains 2 strokes with the putter and he wins this thing?
I mean, it's possible. I guess the one concern, and this is a mild concern, I think he can still compete, but I feel like at this golf course, one of his great advantages is going to be limited a little bit. I don't think this is the kind of golf course where you can just air it out off the tee. Yeah. I mean, you remember Tiger playing here. He had a nice finish the year Francesco won in 2018, and it was a lot of irons off the tee, a lot of positional golf. And it's not that Rory can't play that way. It's just, it takes away a huge advantage for him, which is his ability to just air it out off the tee. And I wonder if that gets taken away. And just that little, now at the same time, I should say on the positive side, his short game has been incredible. And when Rory was really winning major championships and contending in everything he played in, he was really, really good in the short game. His scrambling was very much underrated. So I think there are a lot of positive signs for Rory McIlroy. It's just, does his biggest advantage get taken away a little bit this week? Can the rest of his game back him up? Yes, it can. Will it? It's a different question. When you got guys like Connors and Fitzpatrick and Finau behind him in this range, I'm not afraid of a pivot play off of Rory. But at the same time, I think Rory could have a great week.
Let's jump down to this $9,000 range because I find this to be fascinating. See, Terrell Hatton starts us off at 9,900. Mark Leishman is 97 with Keegan Bradley at 96. Then there's a $300 gap to Russell Henley at 9,300 with Gary Woodland and Patrick Reed rounding out the rest of the $9,000 range. I think there are some really intriguing options here. How do we start to separate one from another?
Well, it's a little bit of sticker shock with Keegan Bradley at 9,600, but I certainly like him. Again, if we're just going on course fit and being an accurate golfer, particularly, off the tee, and the fact that, if you're on team no putt, Keegan is certainly going to make sense. But the thing about Keegan is his putting is actually kind of decent now. Whereas, if we were talking about him 6 months ago, we would have been talking about him almost in the context of a Kyle Stanley, for example. So, not great, but there's some, if you look at what he was doing, for example, at the front end of the year compared to what he's doing now, it actually looks pretty decent for him. So I think Keegan Bradley is a guy I definitely have my eye on. I think he's also going to be popular. So it's kind of a watch out. If he is popular, that's a guy I'm going to be more willing to pivot off of rather than, for example, a Corey Connors, for example. Other than that, Henley's an interesting one. You would think he'd be a good course fit. Doesn't have good history here in terms of when it was actually played at Avenel. And frankly, just hasn't been very good lately. The long iron game doesn't look good either. So even though it seems like he'd be a good course fit, I just don't see it from him. The one guy I'm actually considering here who hasn't been super impressive lately, he was my one and done last week. It's Gary Woodland. I think especially on a course where when Greg brought up the idea of clubbing down, I think that really plays into Gary Woodland's weakness really is pulling out the driver sometimes and just kind of spraying it. But the off the tee game's been really good lately. The putter has really failed him. But again, A, he's not normally a bad putter. And B, even if he stays a bad putter, that can be cured, I think, here in Potomac. So I think Gary Woodland is an interesting play. I think he's going to carry relatively low ownership, at least relative to some of the other popular guys that we're going to discuss.
There is something interesting, Greg, that happens when you get at someone like Gary Woodland, who was very popular last week, and he finishes T24, and it's just an okay finish. No one was super thrilled about it if you were a big investor of Gary Woodland, and nothing has really changed. And I feel like people are just going to say, all right, well, I'll move on and try somebody else this week.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the pricing come out. I'm looking at it. I'm reading about the course, and this terrible feeling came over me. Like I chose the wrong week for Gary Woodland, and I was just 1 week early. I can't believe it. I mean, it sets up perfect. Now, the one thing that I do have in my favor, this is my own personal, I don't want to be a 1 week late on the guy. My own personal thing is he did miss the cut in his only start here. So I think Gary Woodland's going to have a great week, and I think it'll be better than what he did last week. And I have a very, very bad feeling that I'm going to be disappointed. So I love Gary Woodland in this range. He makes a ton of sense. I also love Keegan Bradley, but I wanted to talk about Russell Henley a little bit. Because Sia mentioned his course history. He played here once. He came in tied 46. But when he played here in 2017, he lost 5 strokes approaching the green, 4.98. And that's not the Russell Henley of today. When you look at what Russell Henley has done, it's you're talking about he's gained in 6 in a row, 8 of his last 9. It's really been impressive for him tee to green, and he's an accurate driver of the ball too. So I think Russell Henley is a guy who makes sense to me. He had a bad putting week in his last start at the RBC Heritage, but I think he makes a ton of sense too. So between Keegan, who's played great here, I guess this is the big question for me, because I like Henley and Woodland. I'm fine with playing them. But when it comes to Keegan Bradley, do you think what you said, Sia, sticker shock, is going to affect ownership at all? Because he seems to check every box. His course history is as good as anybody in this field. He has a tied 5th in his one start in 2017. He's been playing great of late, tied 8th and a 4th in his last 2 starts. And we know what kind of ball striker he is.
Yeah, no, I don't think the sticker shock is going to keep people from playing him. I expect him. I don't think he's going to be like Corey Connors popular, but I expect him to be pretty popular because, again, and people like to kind of live in different tiers. They want to have a 10K guy and then a 9K guy, and then they go to whatever. So I think when you're, quote, living in this 9K range, which is always going to be a popular range for people to select golfers in, sometimes multiple, I think he's the one that really sticks out. I mean, you're looking at you can make arguments against Mark Leishman for sure. Hatton has looked good lately, but frankly, the ball striking hasn't been very good lately. Last 3 tournaments, he's lost pretty significantly in the ball striking department. That doesn't mean he's not going to play well, but it does mean your standard player is probably going to pivot off of him. And when they see what Russell Henley has done lately in terms of the finishing positions, and now ho-hum, the finishes have been for Gary Woodland. And then, of course, there's Patrick Reed. So I think when you're in this range, you're just going to eventually gravitate to Keegan Bradley.
Look at Patrick Reed's numbers compared to everyone else in this range. Losing a half a stroke off the tee, losing a half a stroke on approach. He's like how long can he be $9,000 for? How long can odds makers be like, oh yeah, Patrick Reed, that's the guy we don't want to get burned on?
Couldn't you have swapped Webb Simpson for Patrick Reed and nobody would have thought twice about it?
You could have swapped Joel Damon and Patrick Reed, and no one would have batted an eye at it.
Well, but I guess my point is, whether it's Webb Simpson or Cameron Young or Matt Kuchar, who's going to set up well, like there are so many players that could have taken Patrick Reed's spot. It's just very interesting to me that he's like, we see what, Matt Wolff, he's down to, I believe, 7K. Like, it's just interesting to me that Patrick Reed is still living up here. I really can't explain it. He should be 7,900 at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a few reasons why. One, win equity would be, his win equity is as high as almost anybody. He has the ability to. Now, I have the same concerns as you guys. I think from a price setting perspective, his ability to win tournaments when he gets in the mix is higher than most players. I mean, it's right up there in this field. So that's always a concern. And then you also, his finishing positions are a lot better than his ball striking would indicate. Where Tony Finau is on, except for last week, kind of doing exactly the opposite. So when we analyze that, we say, okay, well, Finau's heading in the right direction, Reed's heading in the wrong direction, but they're finishing in very, very similar positions. But you have a tied 26th, 35th, tied 42nd. You feel like, okay, it's better than he's hitting it. He's hitting it terribly. And it has been for a while, but maybe there's something coming around on Reed. I don't know, but I'm not playing him.
Well, Greg, at least we appreciate you using golf facts in your analysis of Patrick Reed. Always fun.
I like that.
Gentlemen, let's move on down to the $8,000 range. But before we do so, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. And we're back. 8,000, little baby range. Paul Casey, 8,800. Sergio Garcia, 87. Max Homa, 2019 champion. Quail Hollow, 8,600. Siwoo Kim, 84. Seamus Power, 83. Jason Day, Webb Simpson, Cam Young, rounded out at 82, 81, and $8,000 flat. Greg, I'm just going to kick it right back to you. Another small range. There are some savvy vets here. There are some guys that could be X factors for the week. What do you see in the $8,000 range?
I see a lot of guys that kind of fit the model here, which is great. You look at what Max Homa has done approaching the green and off the tee. It's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's becoming very familiar with the team no putt camp. And I think I'd like to think he can putt a little better than that and contend in this week. We also, I mean, we haven't seen that. Yeah, you see what you were just moving your mouse over.
Right
He
here.
doesn't go for that long putting poorly. He tends to pop up and it kind of end the streak, right? Every once in a while. It doesn't go for a year in a row. So I kind of smell a good Max Homa putting week, and we know what that means. That means he's a really good play. So I think he's somebody that you don't want to keep out of your lineup this week. I think Siwoo Kim is something brewing with his ball striking right now too. He's gained strokes in his last 4 events approaching the green. He's had some okay finishes, and he looks to me to be ready for a ceiling week. You think of a difficult kind of golf course like this, conditions maybe they might suit him this week. And I really like what he's done off the tee. So I think he's a very fair play. And then lastly, I'll say Seamus Power, who has me worried a little bit because I think he's going to be very popular. But it feels like he's getting back to the Seamus Power before the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, where he made some real change in his ball striking. He became a very good ball striker. And then after losing that lead, it kind of went sideways for him, and he stopped performing at that level. But I think he's getting back on the horse. He's starting to play Seamus Power kind of golf again, and it feels like this is a great setup week for him.
Yeah, Seamus Power, very accurate off the tee. Max Homa, as Greg alludes to, does not go long without pop putting weeks. And when he does pop with the putter, it generally results in a top 10 finish. Okay, Sia, we've got a couple of savvy vet ball strikers in Paul Casey and Sergio Garcia. What else would you like to kind of take out of this $8,000 range?
Yeah, I definitely like Sergio Garcia for one. I mean, especially if you're going to emphasize off the tee here, last 50 rounds, he rates out number 1 there. Greens in regulation, he's top 5. He's sand saves because there will be some bunker play here. He rates out really well there. And the putter, it's been okay. He's got his bad and good moments. But again, if you're on team no putt, Sergio certainly makes a lot of sense. The other 2 guys I like, and as we look at it now, yeah, the approach game was, wow, that was quite bad until the Masters, but we know him classically as a great ball striker. So I'm not necessarily going to hold that stretch against him. Normally I would, but with Sergio's pedigree, I'm just not going to do that. So I like Sergio. I like Webb Simpson. I think Webb Simpson's interesting mostly because of his price and because he's likely, and I could be wrong here, a pivot off of a guy like Cameron Young, who, by the way, I also like. Those are the other 2 guys I like. So the Webb's interesting. You have to make the decision, or you have to decide, okay, is Webb going to pick his game back up? Because if the answer is yes, I think this is a pretty good course fit, especially when you consider he's a solid ball striker traditionally, and his long iron play actually hasn't been that bad as of late. When you're looking at like the proximities 175 and above, the putter has really been bad for him. But again, it's Webb Simpson. I think he can come back from that. I just love the fact that he's 8,100. I think that's a pretty good value for a guy I admittedly am trying to get in early on.
I want to talk about Cam Young here, Greg, and I'm glad that Sia brought him up, because when you've got a rookie like this, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what they're going to be. And when I start looking through Cam Young's stat profile and see 3 top 3 finishes, 1 at Sanderson Farms, 1 at Riviera, 1 at Harbor Town, that's some different styles of golf that you're finding success at. I think that's a pretty compelling case that he's going to be a darn good player.
Yes, he is absolutely. And I was having a conversation earlier and made the same point. The versatility. I mean, you think of him as a bomber, right? Because he is. He straight up moves it. But then you see that finish at the RBC Heritage, and it's like, okay, well, and Sanderson Farms is the same. Maybe he's got a little more to his game than just his than just the long drives off the tee. So he's very interesting. His approach play seems to be a weakness, but at times it shows up and actually performs pretty nice. So I think he has the ability to go out and shoot scores. And this could be a great setup for that. Again, maybe one of those situations where his advantage is taken away a little bit, where that distance is limited to a degree, even though we have some really long holes out here. I think all in all, distance is not going to be a prerequisite here. So I don't quite know what to do with Cam Young. I love the talent level. I love the price. I just feel like there are a couple of other guys in this range and in the range right below him that might be better fits for me.
Hey, Rick, you want to hear? So you always talk about the buckets in the context of you don't really like them that much because how is somebody so much worse, 1 or 2 yards, beyond, let's say 200, for example. So looking at Cameron Young, the last 50 rounds, and to be fair, maybe we shouldn't be looking at Cameron Young 50 rounds, but 175 to 200, he's 119th in this field. 200 plus 12th.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? It's just
he doesn't know how to hit from 198, but from 202, he's the man.
Right, exactly. So,
he loves his 5-iron, but he can't hit his 6.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know how much you want to read into that. The sand saves aren't very good for him, and frankly, the greens in regulation aren't. But that sort of volatility and that sort of randomness round to round, because he has some really pop rounds and he has some really bad rounds, particularly on approach. I think that's almost consistent in terms of what you'd see from a rising rookie. I mean, not everybody's going to be Colin Morikawa and Hovland and just like be good from the time they get on the PGA Tour. So I think the volatility with Cameron Young is, it's either going to kill you or it's going to help you win a GPP.
Round by round volatility sounds like he's going to make your short list of first round leaders later.
Let's see. Yeah, actually, he's the first name on there at 40 to 1.
We'll get to those in just a second. Let's go to the 7K range here. This is where, we've had small ranges everywhere else. This is where it gets massive. So I'm not going to read them all off, but at the top end of the range, Aaron Rai, Matt Kuchar, Doug Ghim, Johnny Vegas, Keith Mitchell. Then it goes down to Brandon Grace, Doc Redman, Grayson Sigg, the aforementioned Matthew Wolff, Nate Lashley, who played well. It's actually played quite well the last couple of weeks. Greg, your call. Open slate. Anywhere you want to go.
Hey, well, real quick, I'm sorry. Yeah. I think Johnny Vegas may have withdrawn. When I was trying to put in lineups before the show, I saw he was out.
Okay, well, I can confirm that. Go ahead, Greg, and I'll find out about Johnny Vegas.
So I wrote down in this range 10 names that I think are very playable. 10 names. There's that many guys that fit, and there's probably more that I'm leaving off just for the sake of space and to actually help you make a decision here. We got to limit it to a degree. But I like Aaron Rai. I like Kevin Streelman. Lonto Griffin seems to have something going with his iron play, so I like him. Matthew Naismith and Sepp Straka may be my 2 favorite plays in this range. They're both at 7,600. I know how I feel about Naismith and his iron play. We all do here. He is a rising star. Sepp Straka has been hitting the ball beautifully and putting right there too. And then there's some guys who played great at the Zurich and carried it over into last week, like Brandon Wu, David Lipsky. Adam Long has been playing some great golf, Alex Smalley, and Martin Laird. And those 10 names, I think, are all viable options. They all check boxes, and many of them are on Team No Putt. So I guess, like I said, Naismith and Straka are probably my 2 favorite here. But if you jump over Brandon Wu,
yeah,
he's a really interesting case to me.
Look at it. 10 of his first 11 cuts he missed.
Yeah. But you look at what has happened since. Some of these events aren't measured, but it's proficiency across the board. Leave out short game. He's proficient all the way across the board in every area. And so I don't really know if the style is going to fit, but that tells me that this guy's just really good. He's a really good all-around player. We haven't figured out what he is yet, like you were talking about with Cam Young, but we know that he can be very good in every area. And so does this hot streak continue? I think it's kind of a high-risk play, but there's a lot of upside there.
Yeah, after missing 10 of his first 11 cuts, he's now made 5 in a row, including 2 top 3 finishes, including a course record runner-up finish last week. So maybe getting more comfortable on tour, maybe finding something in his game for Brandon Wu. I don't know what we want to attribute it to, but clearly the best stretch of golf in his young PGA Tour career thus far.
And it's going to end up keeping it. He's going to have his card. right? You get off to a start like that, and it's brutal. You had a T3 and a tied second in there, and all of a sudden, not only is your confidence sky high, but you're going to keep your card.
I just wanted to see what Lashley's been up to at a flat 7,000. Look at this run from Nate Lashley. T7 at Puerto Rico, T27 at Valspar, T15 in Punta Cana, T18 at the Valero, missed the cut at the RBC Heritage, T11 last week in Mexico. Sia, that is, I'll admit, much better than I was anticipating when I clicked his player profile.
Yeah, I love him. I basically lock buttoned him last week, which obviously paid off. And I got to bring it up again because I'm looking at the proximities again. 10th 175 to 200 and 112th 200 plus. I just think it's funny.
That's kind of my issue with this.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. But no, I think Nate Lashley is a great play, especially at that price at 7,000. I mean, we forget about the metrics for a second. The finishing positions are to kind of tell you what he's worth, at least lately. So I think Lashley's a great play, especially at that range. And it's evidence, by the way, that you can play some of these high-end guys or two of these high-end guys and really dip down to that 7K, 7,100 range where, for example, Luke List is. I think a lot of people are going to like him for his price because, again, part of team no putt, but can absolutely ball strike it and tends to actually be better on the shorter courses, ironically enough, because he can get it out there. I think the other 7K guys that I like here, I was going to say Matt Kuchar, but it hasn't really been, the finishing positions have been pretty good for him, but it's been pretty deceiving because it's been all short game, all putting, all around the green. It's just not necessarily what you're looking for at this course. I still think he's a good course fit, so I'm not going to say he's a bad play, but there's really no evidence as of late that the game that's going to be required here, that he's going to pop. He might be okay, but I just don't know that I see his upside.
T2 at the Valero Texas Open, T3 at the RBC Heritage, but as Sia points out, gained over 7 strokes putting in each of those, which is basically 2 of his top 10 putting performances dating back to 2008 in those last 2 starts, which you worry is a little bit unsustainable. Okay, gentlemen, anybody else in the 7K range? You've got some good drivers of the golf ball like Johnny Vegas, Keith Mitchell. I could not find Sia a Johnny Vegas WD update.
Yeah,
so
that might have.
As of now, I think he's in.
Yeah, I apologize. It might have been something from how sometimes DraftKings has some like an old sort of withdrawal that's still in there until I guess they get confirmation that he's playing. So forgive me on that one. For the record, I do like Johnny Vegas quite a bit. Let's talk about good ball strikers. I think Johnny Vegas fits this course great. He's going to be great off the tee. I agree with you. Keith Mitchell is going to be great off the tee. The approach game can be spotty, but I think he's also a very good course fit. I think Greg brought up Straka, who I also like. Matthew Naismith also like quite a bit. And then I mentioned Liston Laird. Laird is going to be one of those guys that's always going to rate out really well outside of the putter. And again, that's one of those things where I think Kyle Stanley and I think, okay, well, maybe you can survive with, minus 1.5 or 2 strokes putting like Kyle Stanley did when he won this tournament.
David Lipsky Vodka was in the optimal lineup last week, gentlemen. Finished 6th at the Mexico Open. So that is now 3 top 7 finishes in his last 3 starts. He's 7,500. Greg, sorry, did I cut you off there?
No, well, Lipsky was one of my 10 guys I wrote down. I'm sure one of them's going to hit at least, but it was a ceiling week for him last week approaching the green. He gained 9.99 strokes approaching the green last week. And again, coming off the Zurich Classic, he had a really nice finish there. And it seems like there's a little bit of momentum going for him. So he's an interesting play. But there's one other guy I wanted to bring up, and it was he was also in my list of 10. Hard to miss one. But Lanto Griffin. And Lanto, to me, this is the kind of course where you play him. If you're a Lanto lover, like we tend to be here, this could be a place where you come back to him because his short game is the biggest weakness, and it's a real weakness for him. And it concerns me. But it doesn't really concern me at a place like this. You saw on your model earlier, it was among the least important aspects. Mm-hmm. And this is a guy who's starting to drive it like Lanto drives it again. And he's starting to get it going with the irons again as well. And I liked what I saw from him last week with a T15. So I think his game could really fit here too.
Kyle Stanley not in the field this week, but I wanted to just look at that victory from 2017. He lost 1.1 strokes putting. That's all it is, Kyle. Just lose a stroke putting, and you, my friend, can find success. Unfortunately, has not happened enough. Not in the field. That's a shame. Going back to a place he won at. Tough to see.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the real value range. That's the $6,000 range. Again, massive. Svensson, Stewart, KH Lee, Scott Piercy, Steven Yeager, Sun Kang, Tyler Duncan, all of them at $6,900. The min price golfers for this week. Greg Odom. Is it that Greg Odom? Is it
Wow.
From Ohio State?
Of former NBA fame? Greg Odom, is he now a golfer, guys?
Next thing you know, J.R. Smith is going to be golfing. Oh, wait, that's an actual thing.
That would almost be, reasonable. Greg Odom, how would you get clubs fit when you're probably, 7 foot tall? That'd be tough to do.
Well, first of all, there are a couple of options. You're going to need custom fit clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy. So I don't think this is 6'10" Greg Odom or 7 foot Greg Odom, because that guy was a big man. And I remember him looking like he was probably 50 years old as an 18-year-old in college.
That's he was 19. He looked, maybe it's Greg Oden. Jacob finally, let us call him Greg Odom for 5 minutes, just jumped in and said, aren't you thinking of Greg Oden? Yes, we are.
But then there's Lamar Odom. So it's like, there's too many things happening with that name.
Oh man, we butchered the whole thing. Anyway, he's $6,000. Also, Brandon Matthews, Bo Van Pelt, and Bill William McGirt. Save us, guys, in the 6K. Where can we go?
Yeah, I think it's pretty rich in the 6K range up top. I like Tyler Duncan quite a bit. So he's going to he broke a lot of hearts last week, but most of that was because he lost almost 6 strokes short game. I think it was almost 4, and then 4 putting and then 2 around the green. So I don't expect that to happen here. I think he's a good course fit. I liked him last week, and I know it's a slightly different setup, but I like him a little bit this week as well.
Did you always play Tyler Duncan last week?
Oh, maybe it was just me. He was talked about a lot. So I actually didn't look at his ownership percentage. Check it out. I think it's at least going to be a little higher than you think. He was 7,200, if I recall. And he sort of fit into a lot of lineup constructions in terms of how people were building.
Okay, 9.8%. That's more than I would have thought it was.
There we go. Yeah, so I like Tyler Duncan. I considered Adam Svensson. I don't think I'm going to go there. Ryan Armour is going to be a popular pick in this range. Another guy that broke some hearts last week, but I think is obviously a great course fit. He's going to keep it in the fairway. His long iron game, like I mentioned last week, is actually quite good. So he's really, truly a great course fit here. A couple other names I've sort of glanced at. TPC Lee, of course, and Danny Lee. I think Danny Lee is interesting. He can sometimes pop with the ball striking. It's super high risk, and the putter's usually not very good. But when he does pop with the ball striking, it's usually pretty solid.
Maybe I should have brought this up at the top of the show, Greg, but I think Sia just reminded me talking about Ryan Armour breaking some hearts, talking about Tyler Duncan breaking some hearts last week. Aren't these like the exact opposite golf courses? So like if you had a guy who is known for accuracy, not distance off the tee, and missed the cut last week, that shouldn't have been all that much of a surprise, right? Considering the way that we assessed Vedanta to be generous off the tee and playing long, like back-to-back weeks where it's a completely different setup. Shouldn't those heartbreakers be back in play?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, absolutely. And it was a air it out off the tee last week. And you saw it on the leaderboard. Everybody on the leaderboard was averaging over 320 off the tee. And it turned out to be a real separator over 4 days. You know, after the first 2 rounds, it wasn't. It was much more mixed. And it was something that caught my attention. But as the weekend progressed, the long hitters really prevailed. I don't think that's going to happen this week. Again, I think it takes away some of that advantage. So these other skill sets, Tyler Duncan, for instance, he missed the cut last week, but he gained over 2.5 shots approaching the green.
Yeah.
And he's been moderately gaining, since the Puerto Rico Open, which was back in March, early March. So he's been hitting the ball nicely, and I think he's a very playable option this week. And I wouldn't worry about last week at all.
Yeah, and look at where he's had success. Harbortown, T12, that's kind of your accuracy course. Corrales actually rates out as a place where accurate drivers tend to do
it's not
well.
that long either.
Yeah, T28 there. Like this, I'm not a Tyler Duncan guy. This is a Tyler Duncan week. Like it has to be. It has to be.
Yeah. I think so. He'd be a guy in the 6'10" range. I would definitely be highlighting and looking at. If there is a Tyler Duncan week, I think this is it. So I wouldn't worry about your heart getting broken last week, Sia.
Anybody else here, Greg, in the $6,000 range?
Yeah, right below him, Austin Smotherman. I think if you're a team no putt guy,
back to Smoth,
right? Just go back to the well. He probably is, hurt some feelings the last couple of weeks, but it's keeping the price down. And I think this golf course could be very well for him. What he's done with his tee to green play has been really, really impressive. I shouldn't say tee to green, his ball striking. And you look at some of these golf courses where he's really struggled around the greens, and they're all pretty much, with the exception of Valero, they're Bermuda grass greens. And it's a very different style of short game. And coming up here to Kentucky bluegrass and some more bunkers and a little more tradition, I think it could give him some reprieve around the greens. And again, not an area that I'm thinking is critical this week. Then I go down to the next guy on my list is Sam Ryder, who this is kind of just a feeling that he's going to turn a corner. I really liked what I saw at the Zurich Classic. And then again, that's eye test. There's no data to back it up, but I really liked what I saw. He was playing with Doc Redman, and he seemed to be hitting the ball really nicely. And it seems like there's a little bit, he's turning the corner with his game a little bit. And it's getting better. I clicked on the wrong name. So it was just the Zurich that we saw, and it's been really bad before that. But I liked what I saw at Zurich, and I think it could turn a corner, and this could be a good course for him. Again, it's a flyer, and it's the opposite of everybody else when you look at that profile. It's the opposite of everybody else that I really like this week. But I'm not afraid of that in this range.
No, neither am I. I have seen every time they show Sam Ryder, Greg, on TV, they show the ace. They show the ace at WI. He's hopefully getting that PIP money, getting those.
He's got to be on the list.
So
it's constant.
So I want to fully endorse that Austin Smotherman call. I think that's a great call. And I do want to point out another young gun that rates out very similarly to Austin Smotherman, who kind of is just crushing it in the ball striking department, but he has limitations thus far with the around the green and the putter. And it's Hayden Buckley. So I think you could kind of almost slot Hayden Buckley and Austin Smotherman sort of in the same spot in terms of what their potential is on this course.
Here's Buckley. Ooh, look at that off the tee number. Once you get to the 3, that's pretty good. Yeah, he is, oh boy, not a good putter. Not good around the green. Everything else, great. That's good stuff there, Hayden Buckley. All right, gentlemen. Anybody else in the 6K range before we move along?
I got 2 more names.
Yeah, hit me.
Kevin Chappell. He has my interest. So kind of a throwback, right? A very Kyle Stanley-esque play here.
Yes.
But he was tied 29th at the Zurich, or 29th at the Zurich, tied 18th at the Valero, tied 15th at Corrales Punta Cana Championship. They took the resort and club out of there.
Best part.
Yeah, the best part. He had a nice putting week at Valero, which I really like. And I think this might be a healthy Kevin Chappell coming back into form, and his profile through his history when he's been healthy has been this kind of golf course. So I think he's a really interesting play. And I'll throw one more out there, an ultimate team no putt guy with serious value. And I can't quite tell if he's a fan, if the show is a big fan of his, but Paul Barjon.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? I mean, he hasn't made any cuts, but boy, has he hit it good.
He does hit it good.
Check it out. I mean, it's great, right? This ball striking is really, really good of late. Putting, not very good. And look, let's stick with the strategy here. If you need a 62K guy, let's jump on Paul Barjon.
Oh, I played a lot of Paul Barjon during like this area. Sony, American Express, then probably too long into these missed cuts here. But hey, sometimes you just got to roll with your guys.
It might be time to come back with him.
So you don't need to twist my arm. I'll do it. All right. Well, see ya. We have learned that the world famous Sia Mac Daddy narrative lineup is quite popular. Do you have something to feed us this week?
So a couple things. I've been receiving some tweets, and this week I got a tweet from John Markowski, and it's better than last week's tweet.
Better than most?
It's better than most. So he has a really good Wells Fargo bank one. Before we even get to that, I had one that I was kind of workshopping regarding Potomac, Maryland, but I'll just go with the Potomac, Maryland, or the Potomac Matland lineup, where you have a lineup of all mats. Oh, and here we are.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them.
Wow.
Yeah. It's big time. So obviously that's 8 names. You can only fit 6 in there. So I went with Matt Fitzpatrick, Matt Jones, Matt Kuchar, Matt Naismith, Matt Schwab. I'm not going to call him Matthias for the purposes of this. And Matt Wolf. So a lot of Matts in there. You can swap out Matt Wolf if you want for, let's see, Matt Wallace.
Probably
of course.
Matthews is probably cheaper than Matthew Wolf, but
He's min price, Matthews.
Yes.
And
Wallace.
he rips the ball.
Fair enough. And Wallace is 6,600, I believe. So he's 400 cheaper than Matt Wolf. You're leaving money on the table regardless. But that is the all Matland lineup right there.
Okay, so we learned that the all alliteration lineup would have won like $5,000. We learned that I don't remember the entirety of the alcoholic beverages one from last week, but it had 2 of the 6 optimals in it with Lipsky and John Rom and Coke.
Rye played great too, right?
Yeah,
okay, that's
Rye
right.
whiskey play, and Steven Yeager and Kelly Jägermeister and Kelly Craft Beer also made the cut. If it wasn't for Chaser Siffert, that literally probably would have won a tournament. It was that good.
So Fitzpatrick, Jones, Kuchar, Neesmith, Schwab, Wolf is the official TPC Potomac lineup.
It is, and if you want, you can swap out Wolf, because I would understand that. And if it was me, I'd put in Matt Wallace there.
Okay, so that's Sia's. Now, John Markowski, wasn't he the inventor of the of last week's narrative lineup?
He was, and he is coming strong with this one, as you can see, Rick.
Oh wow. Okay, so this is my first time seeing this. So John Markowski tweets. We have this up on YouTube if you're watching. Wells Fargo, a financial services company. That is correct. We're off to a great start. Seamus Power Broker, Jason Day Trader, Matthew Wolf of Wall Street, Matt Dow Jones.
I think that's the best one. I love that one.
401 KH Lee.
I think that's my favorite.
That's pretty good too.
Get your retirement plans in order. And finally, Peter U line of credit, rounding out
Brilliant.
this team. Wow.
For the record, that leaves about 4 to 5K on the table.
Nice.
It's great. It's an all-timer, John. Wow. It's so good.
And but for the record, it's not even a bad lineup. You know what I mean? Like, this fits. I mean, I think this is a decent lineup.
It's Matthew Wolf is in both of their narrative lineups, which I suppose is a little bit scary. But
yeah, I guess that means he's a must play. Ceiling week for Matt Wolf.
We need to get John his own segment on the show. Just have him check in every Monday afternoon for like this 3 minutes. Like, John, come on and just like give us your best
This is fantastic.
Everybody else out there, you're competing with John, who's carrying around the gold medal right now. But feel free to tweet narratives as the weeks go by.
See, Peter U line of credit is really good because it's the sound. It's not even the spelling. 401KH Lee is pretty dang awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be thinking outside the box to come up with those. It's phenomenal.
John must work in finance, right? Like this is pretty good.
I mean, if you don't work, I mean, I guess, but yeah,
see us trying to take it away from like anybody could come up with this.
I'm just saying, like the U line of credit, I think, is the one that I think tips the hand that perhaps he does work in finance. To your point.
Wow. I don't know how you're going to follow it up, but any final thoughts here, gentlemen? Oh no, we have first round leaders. My apologies. So we've already been aware of Cam Young 40-1 first round leader. Sia, who else you got?
So just keep in mind, this is subject to change based on tee times. I do know up in that sort of Northern Virginia, Maryland area, it's going to be warm for most of the week. And then you're going to see some rain like Greg suggested over the weekend. So I think I'm probably going to be looking for morning tee times again. I'll obviously monitor that. So again, subject to change. If some of these guys are going out in the late afternoon, I'll probably switch them out for somebody else. But Cameron Young, 40-1, like you said. Keith Mitchell, 50-1. Sepp Straka, Greg's boy, 50-1. I had crossed out Vegas, but it looks like he's in there. So Jonathan Vegas at 65-1. And then finally, Luke List at 90-1. I think that's all just great value.
There you go. All 40-1 or longer. Young, Mitchell, Straka, Vegas, List, the first round leaders. Okay, now, gentlemen, I open it up to any final thoughts before we get out of town.
I can't wait for this week. There's so much to like, and it's going to be really fun to put them together.
Yeah, it's going to be easy to build lineups. So I think it's going to be easy for everybody to build lineups. So just kind of keep that in mind. Keep some pivots in mind to switch up your lineup from the guy next to you. Or girl next to you.
We will be back Tuesday morning, mega preview pod. That's Storylines Best Bets one and done. Make sure you go vote now. The fan one and done vote. It's open. The link is in the description. Get your entry in because we need it by Tuesday morning so that we can announce it on the air. For now, big thanks goes to producer Jacob. Does all the hard work behind the scenes. That's Sia Nejad. You can find him on Twitter at Sia Nejad, and that's Greg DuCharme. You can find at The Real GFD. You can find me at RickRunGood. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.